Good morning, Notre Dame. I got the chance to talk this week with Kate. She's a mom, a podcaster, and an Irish football superfan. Let's see what she had to say. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for being with us. Will you kind of introduce yourself to us and introduce? And I hear you have a podcast. So will you tell us about your
Yeah.
podcast?
Yep. So my name is Katie Bell. I'm originally from South Bend. I graduated from Ball State and I was a teacher for 4 years before I had my twin girls. They're one. And my friend that he went to Marion High School, I went to Penn. He started, it's called Victory Lap Media. It's a production company and they do all sorts of podcasts like the NFL. They're big into like college gambling podcasts like that. So he asked me to come on as a guest for their Notre Dame football podcast. So I came on as a guest here and there. This was when the girls were like 2 months old. So it was kind of like whenever I had time, I would come on, but I wasn't a regular by any means.
Sure.
Um, and then they asked me to join officially towards the end of last season. And so now Ryan Aronowski and I are co-hosts of the weekly podcast. We actually do 2 episodes a week usually. He's a firefighter, and again, I'm a mom. So it's kind of like if we have time, we record 2 episodes. If we don't, we just combine it into one, and it's a little over an hour. So
Yeah. Well, that is so cool. And so it's just like previewing the game or like looking at the past games, stuff like that.
yeah, so our first one of the week is always like a preview is like a recap of the game that was on Saturday. And we'll talk about, like what we did. People listen to podcasts, they want the X's and O's, but you also have to have some personality in there. So we'll talk about like where we were tailgating, or I know you and I had met at a tailgate that my family hosted, stuff like that. We also do bar reviews. So we'll review like Corby's and the linebacker, things like that.
Okay.
And then later in the week, we'll do our pregame, our preview. And so we'll talk. Last night, we actually recorded that for the Virginia game. And we were talking all about, is their quarterback going to play? He has bruised ribs. So we kind of talk through things like that. We go over the over-unders, the spread. And we've started opening it up to Q&A. And that's been really successful.
Tell us, how did you become a Notre Dame fan? I mean, I know you're from South Bend, but how did you become a Notre Dame fan, and why stay a Notre Dame fan? Why are you a part of the fan base?
I stay a Notre Dame fan because I'm neurotic. But My the answer is my dad. I don't remember a time in my life where I wasn't a Notre Dame fan. When I was 6, I'm 28 now. So when I was 6 years old, he took me to my very first game. And after that, I was just completely sold. And it wasn't easy to be a Notre Dame fan at that time because when I went to my first game, Bob Davie was the coach, and then we had Tyrone Willingham, and then George O'Leary was mixed in there for like a couple days, and then Charlie Weiss, and then we got to Brian Kelly. So this is the best era of football that I've seen would be Brian Kelly's tenure. And for us, it's more than football. My dad and I go to one away game per year, and that started when I was in high school. And it was more about us spending time together. You go to the games, but there's more than just going to the games, right? Like you're in
Yeah.
the car, we're driving, and we're bonding. My dad has always wanted 3 boys, and he had 3 girls. And then I got pregnant with twins, and he kept saying, I know it's a boy. I know one of them has to be a boy. And I had twin girls. So I was always like his son. He would take me to games. We talk about everything, talk about life, and make memories. And it actually started with his dad. My dad grew up in South Bend, and his dad started taking him to games when he was 6 too. And his dad recently passed away last December from COVID during the pandemic.
I'm
And so
so
that was really
sorry.
hard. Thank you. And um, through all of that, my dad has just said if it weren't for his dad, he wouldn't be a Notre Dame fan. So I think it's a lasting legacy that has been passed on for generations in my family.
As you've been a Notre Dame fan, I've seen on Twitter that you had a little bit of pushback against being Notre Dame fan. Can you talk on that?
I did. So I have said I will never release my ex-boyfriend's name. I'm married with kids. I don't need to drag him through the mud. When I was in college, I got broken up with, and the person sent me a list. He sent me a list of 8 things to change about myself. And if I changed all 8 things, we could get back together, which is a little bit forward. I wouldn't send the
Yeah.
list of 8 things to somebody. Number 1 was there's a lot more to life than Notre Dame. I am a big fan too. Not only do you have to plan your schedule around every game, you think going to every big game is realistic. Also, when the football team loses, you would think someone in your family died. Yeah, so that was number 1, was that I was too big of a Notre Dame fan and it was impeding on his time.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and there's not a lot more to life than Notre Dame because for me, it's not just a football game. It's time with my
Yeah.
dad. It's when I went to Ball State for 4 years, I drove home for every single home game and spent time with
Really?
my dad. Yes, and
Yeah.
it's time with my family, and I hope to brainwash my daughters and my girls and take them, and I tweeted it to be funny, like, just to my followers, and somehow Barstool Sports picked it up. The Golics got wind of it. They were talking about it on, their show, and then
Mhm.
Brady Quinn was tweeting at me, Ian Book was tweeting at me, and so that was not my
Really?
intent, was to, like, drag this guy through the mud because
Yeah.
I'm not a malicious person by any means. The South Bend Tribune called, ABC 57 called. It ended up being like this huge, crazy thing, and I just think it's funny because if that's my number one flaw, then okay, I'm not gonna change.
With the last home game coming up, we met at a tailgate, and I've seen your tailgate game. You have an excellent tailgate game, like
Thank you.
excellent. So, I'm a freshman, and just with our viewers, how can we all up our tailgate games? Like, how can we celebrate Notre Dame football better at the home games? What's your tips?
It's all about the spread. I mean, you have to have a diverse option of food. You have to have a tent because
Okay,
for the elements, like whether it's too sunny, people want to sit under the tent. Whether it's snowy, raining, whatever, you have to have a tent.
right,
The flagpole. You have to have a flagpole because everybody knows the cell phone service out there is awful. So nobody can find you.
right,
And you
right.
actually found us with the Ball State flag
I
because
did.
you can't have a Notre Dame flag out there. Everybody has a Notre Dame flag. You have to have something that people are gonna be like, oh yeah, that's Katie's tailgate because I went to Ball State.
Okay,
So that's how you get people to find you. And I just like go out in the morning, put the flagpole up, tweet the poll number I'm by and the flagpole like picture. And then people don't have to text me all day trying to find me. They can just be like, oh, there's the flag.
right.
So yeah, you gotta have the tent, the flagpole, you've gotta have food. Um, and then you've got to have some drinks too. Gotta have, yeah. I prefer the full bar setup, so that's what we do.
Um,
Great.
Thank you so much for talking to me. You've been a huge help. You've just like to rally the Notre Dame fan base, I think, on Twitter and in the tailgates and in the stadium this whole season.
Thank you. And I am pro Brian Kelly. Like there are people that are out for his head. And I just want to say he has given me in my 28 years of life the best football I've ever seen Notre Dame play. And so I don't think you're going to find anybody better. He's the man for the job. This is his dream job. So in this household, we love Brian Kelly.
In this household, we love Brian Kelly. Well, let me just ask you, since you've given us your take on Brian Kelly, how many years until we see a champion? What do we think? What do we think?
I don't know. With all the young guys he played last weekend, I mean, I would say it's going to be in that class. That class will see a national championship. I don't
Really?
know if it's
So
going to be next year. I don't know how that looks with Buckner coming in,
yeah,
first year as a full-time starter. I know he's had experience this year. So I,
right.
I don't know if it's next year. You got to go to Ohio State, um, playing Clemson at home, I think. Trying to remember the schedule for next year.
Right.
Um, but I definitely think it will be the class of the guys that he has started playing this year. Logan Diggs, all those guys.
I hope that Kate got us all riled up for the last home game versus Georgia Tech. Go Irish this weekend, and for ND Sunrise, I'm Sam Kaufman.